السلام عليكم ومرحبا بكم حلقة جديدة من برنامج بوزيتيفا موروكو واللي يتم تقديمه وإعداده من الديار الكندية. الموضوع ديال اليوم هو حول الانتخابات الرئاسية للولايات المتحدة، ومعايا ضيوف اللي غادي يمكنونا أننا نديروا قراءة لهذه الانتخابات ونتائجها، ثم الوقع ديالها على العلاقات المغربية الأمريكية والعلاقات الأمريكية والعالم. فشكرا دائما على التتبع، شكرا على تشجيعكم إيانا، ثم كما أشرت له في بداية تقديم البرنامج أننا سنتأقلم مع لغة الضيوف، واليوم سيكون الحديث باللغة الإنجليزية، فشكرا على التفاهم. وكما أشرنا له في بداية البرنامج، فاليوم سنتأقلم لغويا مع ضيوفنا لتحليل نتائج الانتخابات الرئاسية الأمريكية. سنتحدث باللغة الإنجليزية ونشكركم على التفاهم مرة أخرى. Today, I have two special guests that will discuss with me the fact that we will focus on the American elections and the impacts of those results, be it on the relations between Morocco and the United States of America, or the United States of America and the world. Today, I have Professor Elisabeth Myers, who is a lawyer, law professor, strategist, communications expert, arts advocate, and musician. After a 25-year career as a litigator in private law firms, she was the founding editor-in-chief of online magazine Inside Arabia in Washington, D.C. until December 2019. Currently based in Marrakesh, Morocco, Elisabeth is the democracy lead for Democrats abroad Morocco. She has presented seminars, webinars, online courses, Facebook and Instagram lives, as well as internal training sessions for the United States and foreign government agencies and universities throughout the world. She is also an adjunct associate professor of law at the Washington College of Law at American University in Washington, D.C., where she received her Juris Doctor degree in 1993. She received her bachelor from Hunter College of the City University of New York in 1988. You're the most welcome, Professor Elisabeth Myers.
شكرا سلمى. السلام عليكم.
مرحبا بك on the media platform Positiva Morocco, which is broadcasted from Canada. My second guest is Mr. Dr. Abdelkader Filali. Dr. Abdelkader Filali is a part-time professor of geopolitics at Ottawa University, part-time professor of conflict studies at St. Paul University, founder of a think tank, POLISENS Ottawa Institute, PhD, Ottawa University Political Studies, Comparative Politics, Master of Arts in Political Science, Master University focused on the Southeast Asian politics, and a Bachelor Honors from University of Toronto, specialized in Latin America. Very, very most welcome, Professor Filali.
Shukran Salwa, and this is my pleasure.
Actually, Professor Myers and Professor Filali, I really want to express you my honor to receive you today on the media platform Positiva Morocco from Canada. And thank you to the technology that has permitted us to communicate and exchange even during the pandemic situation. Today, our discussion will focus on the American elections and the impact of the result of those elections on the relations between Morocco and the United States of America, and the United States of America and the whole world. My first question will be regarding the conduct of the American elections and the fact that the whole world was holding its breath. What is your reading of the highlights of the results of those elections? And I will start with the opinion of Professor Myers.
Thank you very much, Selma. Yeah, so the election had some not unanticipated consequences, but was unusual in our history in that one thing, it was called quite late in the process. So on election day, we had millions of people having voted by November the 3rd. And we know that there were a number that came in from abroad, such as from here in Morocco. And we also know that most of those votes that came in from abroad were probably voting Democrat. And in doing so, we had to obviously send our ballots in by mail. I vote in Virginia, and I sent mine in. It arrived actually October the 2nd. But there were a number of states that had deadlines for receiving absentee ballots that were after the November 3rd date. So, for example, Florida, the state in which Trump votes, the deadline for receipt of absentee ballots was actually November the 13th, 10 days after the date of the election, as long as they were postmarked by the date of the election. So what that ended up doing, that in conjunction with the millions of people also because of the COVID pandemic who wanted to vote by mail rather than by in person, standing in lines near people and risking their health and safety, there were many ballots that came in by mail. And what that meant was, and certainly not unanticipated, but what that meant was we knew it was going to take a lot more time to count those ballots. So consequently, the election was not called on election day, as often it is. It was not called until 4 days after that, with President-elect Joe Biden having been announced the winner based on the mathematical numbers, which showed that there was simply no way mathematically that Trump could have surpassed for purposes of gaining the electoral votes needed to win. And so we have, I think it's 306 electoral votes for Joe Biden and 223, I guess, or 43 for President Trump. And still, up until just recently, the ballots were they're still being counted. So there are still some states at issue, right, as to who won the popular vote in those states, but they don't count now because Biden has reached the 270 minimum electoral votes needed in order to mean that he's now the new president-elect. So what has this perhaps unusual delay in not calling the election for 4 days meant? It has meant that we are in the situation where, although it's clear mathematically Trump has lost, he still refuses to concede that he lost the election. His campaign has filed a number of lawsuits trying to overturn the will of the people, some of which were filed even before Election Day. And now the 4 years of false narrative that there was massive fraud, massive voter fraud, and an unfair election has been coming to fruition as he tries to go forward and cling to power. Unfortunately for him at the moment, he is basically being abandoned by the top Republican senators in that quest. He has lost, he is now 1 for 19 in the court cases. In other words, out of 20 court cases, 19 of them have either been dismissed or the lawyers representing the campaign have simply withdrawn as counsel in those cases because they have not been able to provide any evidence to judges. And that is what must happen in a court of law. You must first have a prima facie case, and you must actually bring in evidence. So when judges have asked counsel, do you have any evidence for that claim that there's massive voter fraud? There's one response on the record that says, Your Honor, it's coming. Well, a court case, you cannot have evidence is coming. It has to be provided. If it's not provided, you don't have a case and it gets dismissed. So there are at least three situations that the Trump claims about the alleged fraud are just completely, they've been debunked by his own Department of Homeland Security. As I said, Republican senators are abandoning that. The claims that in Philadelphia and Detroit, Republican observers were simply not allowed in the room is another thing that was debunked on the record in answer his campaign lawyers to a judge. Well, were there Republican observers standing next to Democrat observers? Yes, Your Honor. Well, case dismissed. So the millions of ballots allegedly altered by Democrats, it's a fabrication. The votes cast after Election Day, this is the point about there are actually 20 states that accept votes to receive them after Election Day as long as they are cast or postmarked by Election Day. So, so the narrative was not unanticipated. We've seen it for 4 years, and even in the 2016 election, which he won, obviously. And so that we're in a situation now, well, what happens now? We still have the Electoral College to, electors must vote on December 14th. That's when they must cast their vote. And most of the states that they're voting in require that they follow the popular vote. So there's very little risk that they're going to be bribed or otherwise influenced by Trump to vote otherwise. And currently the popular vote for all but a few of those still remaining states is for Biden. And so that's where we are.
Yeah, well, actually, what you said about the ballots reminds me of that very famous quote of Abraham Lincoln when he said that the ballot is now stronger than the bullets. And actually, can we convert the bullets into all what Trump is making now was troubles, and especially all the tweets he's sending to discredit actually the elections results. Maybe Professor Filali can hear you about this question of a reading to the conduct of the American elections, and now those elections have impact in our actually having one result. Biden is the president of the United States of America now.
Thank you very much again, Selma. Thanks for Professor Myers for the contribution in this debate. And I think Professor Myers gave a thorough description of all the technicalities, the hidden maneuvers and procedures that were taking place in the American election politics I would say the last 2 months. And I think I will be focusing on three main concepts that Professor Myers used. I would be probably using, this is an unusual event, an unusual election in the history of the United States. This is one. A third concept is going to be anticipation. She focused a lot on the anticipation in her thorough description of the American election. And third, I think, constitution. So I'll be briefly trying to focus on those three main key terms in Professor Myers' description. So it is usual that such frictions and such delay in the American history of election happened. It happened with Abraham Lincoln before in the election. It happens in Hoover and FDR, Roosevelt's election. It happened with Clinton and George Bush. But what is unique, what is unusual about this election is a president of the United States before the election said that he will be winning the election if there won't be no fraud. So the unusual situation of this election is having a premeditated, intent from the beginning that this is going to be the case. If I will lose, I will be just jumping on the idea of fraud, and and I've never seen in the history of the American election such statements pronounced by political or political actors and political candidates in the history of the United States. But Professor Myers also insisted on the key term, that is anticipation. So it was obvious that this is going to be probably a unique election in the United States. We are dealing with a situation that is very unique. And for me, as you can tell from my analysis, I'm not going to be a lot focusing on the technicalities of the election, how it started, where is it right now, but I will be probably worried about one thing, which is the culture war in the United States, the friction and division within American society because of probably this administration and because of this election. And what worries me a lot is the spread of an ideology. So I was probably fortunate enough to attend one of the demonstrations in Ottawa next to the Canadian Parliament. And I have seen supporters of Trump, Canadian supporters of Trump, having their slogans, their T-shirts with, they are called Sons of Trump, and it was worrying for me. And as an academic, it's something that rings a bell of threat to this society. So my concern is within the American society, this friction, this division, and I think this is going to be a heavy task upon the shoulders of President Biden starting from January 2021. It's going to be a heavy task for him to restore what has been, I would say, tarnished by such politics in the United States. And my third concept is constitution. And I think when a good reading of the American Constitution, and the Professor Myers is I think better, she can correct me, there is a reading of the American Constitution that is called a bar fight Constitution reading. We don't know who is winning, we don't know who is losing. So there's this reading from the Constitution, but yet there is something about the American Constitution and American politics. It is about institutions. And I think the previous administration played a key role in diminishing such credibility of institutions. And just yesterday, we've heard the firing of the Christopher Krebs, of the director of cybersecurity, for simply certifying that this election was the most secure election in the history of the United States. So he was fired just yesterday.
You said the truth, yes.
And I think, for me, as I said, is the division within American society. A huge gap right now within American society. And it was the first time we have seen urban violence between what have been called or have been labeled by the media the extreme right and the extreme left. And this was unusual in the American. It was there. I think it was hidden there, but I think Trump and his administration just nourished such ideologies to re-emerge in the surface of the American politics.
Yes, and
I think that's so important. Can I add to that? The concern, I share the concern about our American institutions. It's a very serious concern because it's been they are being undermined now daily. They were being undermined a little less frequently over the last 4 years, but nevertheless, it's a deliberate attempt to undermine institutions such as the Department of Justice, such as I mentioned the Postal Service. That performs a very important democratic function. It makes sure that we get our votes in, and as you said earlier, Salma, the ballot is stronger than the bullets. That's been our strength in American democracy. Trump has undermined the inspectors general in firing 6 of them in the course of May through June of this year. I mean, just one thing after another has been endangered by this president.
yeah,
And it's actually deadly serious, because one of the concerns I have is that according to experts such as Masha Gessen, who's a Russian-American analyst and an expert on autocracies and formation of autocracies, we have all of the ingredients right now in the US for the making of an autocracy, a dictatorship. And she has suggested that we're actually in the first stage of the 3-part process by which that occurs, where we have people who want and need economic security. They want to be taken care of. They want to see some kind of savior. And ironically, or maybe diabolically, Trump has portrayed himself as that, the chosen one to save the country. He said, only I can do it.
yes,
Now, this is not alarmist. These are facts on the ground. When you have somebody who is dismantling the democracy daily, including the transition period, he's stopped the head of the General Services Administration from cooperating with the Biden transition team, which is a normal function post-election when there's going to be a changeover in administrations. The transition team, the president, the president-elect, the vice president-elect, they get all of the access to the intelligence information, the equipment that they need, office space that they need in order to effect a transition calmly, smoothly, and effectively, so that when they hit the ground on January the 20th, they hit the ground running and not trying to play catch up. We have some serious things in going on in this country with the pandemic, with the economy. They have to be addressed immediately. We don't have time for them to play catch up. Yeah. And so they're doing their utmost to make sure that doesn't happen. And I think that others are beginning to cooperate with them, especially when you have the Republicans abandoning Trump. He will realize at some point, he won't like it, but he's going to be alone in this fight, except for maybe his family. But and I'm not being alarmist, but experts have made disturbing analogies to the rise of Hitler in the 1930s. And you just have to look at history, and you really, really have to wonder how far we can let this go, how far the Republican Party can let this go. Because if democracy is undermined, ultimately their party and elections and our future is undermined. And that's why this is just so important.
Yes, and if you permit me just to make a transition again by saying a quote of Bonaparte. He said that in politics, an absurdity is not a handicap. He wanted actually to signify that irrationality in politics is really welcome. And with what we have lived, actually the whole world has lived the situation with you in America, what we can say is that it is a very uncomfortable situation that we hope that the coming days will heal. It's like a wound, actually, and that America is suffering from. Well,
Right.
my second question will be maybe more positive, and because I imagine that the relationship between Morocco and the United States of America, those relationships actually have always nurtured strong bilateral relations. And do you think that the impacts that having Biden as the President of the United States of America will be positive on both the diplomatic and the economic fields, as they are the most important parts of the Moroccan and American cooperation? Maybe we will have the opinion of Professor Myers, please.
All right, with pleasure. I was going to give Dr. Filali the chance to go first this time, but my take on where diplomacy will go in general under Biden is it will be a positive thing. If I can just start more generally rather than Morocco, he has pledged as part of his campaign, as part of his campaign rhetoric, to bring decency back into diplomacy. And we've already seen that, where you had leaders from around the world, with a few exceptions, calling him to congratulate him immediately. Leaders with whom he is not an unknown quantity. He knows who our allies are. He's interacted with our allies for decades. And so from the standpoint, he already has these relationships, and also a much greater understanding of how the world operates than Trump has. Trump had absolutely no idea of foreign policy and still doesn't. He just likes dictators, I'm afraid. You know, when he calls El-Sisi of Egypt his favorite dictator, well, what does that tell you? It's a sad situation. Biden also is well aware of Morocco and the issues that Morocco faces. I'm pleased to say that I was able to celebrate his birthday with, well, probably a couple of thousand other people in 2014 in Marrakesh at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, where he spoke to a crowd that was extremely positive, and his message was extremely positive about the value that entrepreneurship can bring to developing countries like Morocco and other countries in Africa. And I am quite convinced that he will maintain the close and friendly relationship that the U.S. has had since the U.S.'s beginning in 1777, when Morocco was the first country to recognize our independence. Oh, and by the way, happy Independence Day.
Thank you so much.
That's why you see the flag.
Yes.
Yes, right. Well, and I'm wearing mine. Here it is over here. I'm wearing mine over here to show
We're so
the
happy actually to have this celebration today. We're recording on the 18th of November, and a very symbolic day for all the Moroccans all over the world and Morocco's friends.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Yeah. So I'm very positive and sanguine about the relationship that Biden is going to bring on the international arena for the U.S. certainly with respect to Morocco, but also more in general. We will have a better relationship with our allies, and we'll have a better understanding of how we need to deal with our adversaries. And I think that he will, unlike Trump talking about ending endless wars and withdrawing troops, and there was just reporting today about Trump literally withdrawing the thousands of troops that are left in Afghanistan and Syria immediately, and I do not believe that Biden will leave that gap there for Al-Qaeda or ISIS or any of the other Islamist or I don't know what terrorist groups. I do not believe he's going to leave a void where those groups can once again become powerful.
Yeah, maybe can we hear Mr. Professor Filali's opinion on the?
I think the bilateral relations between Morocco and the United States has always been smooth and good in the history, starting, as Professor Myers mentioned, 1777, the year where Morocco recognized the independence of the United States as the first country in the world to recognize such independence. And I think my only concern is what took place during the Obama administration, when the United States ambassador at United Nations, Susan Rice, pushed for a paragraph in the settlement in the Moroccan Sahara to give more, I would say, space to the MINURSO's mission in Laayoune, in Morocco, to have a role in the human rights aspect. And this situation, as you can recall, kind of ignited a kind of, I would say, a cold friction between Morocco at that time and Obama's administration. But soon after that, I think Obama took a very, courageous decision to just retreat that paragraph from the United Nations. And I think 2 weeks later, we've seen John Kerry come into to King Mohammed VI, and he welcomed him. So I think the most important thing that we could probably put in here is, it's, I think, a good lesson for the Democratic Party to take, lessons from what took place during the Trump administration. And I think the task for Biden administration in his mandate starting from 2021 is to be aware of hardliners within Democratic Party. And I would not say the rise of leftist members within the Democratic Party. He's aware of this kind of an alarming situation within the Democratic Party, to steer the sheep towards moderation, and to avoid, as I told before, try to minimize this friction within the American society, and, as Professor Myers mentioned, to have the allies of yesterday still intact, still in place. And I think Morocco's strategic location and strategic positioning is very, I think, vital to the American interest in Africa, in Europe, in the Arab world. And I think the Moroccan foreign policy lately has shown such wisdom in terms of dealing with issues in the Gulf countries, in the Arab world. And yeah, thank you.
May I just add to that?
Yes,
Yes, I do agree that there was some friction there, but I think after that episode, I believe it was after, I think it would have had to be after, the United States praised Morocco's autonomy plan for the region as serious, credible, and realistic. And that I do not believe the US is going to go back upon.
I think, sorry for the interruption. And I think this is going to just simply to reinforce the good relations between the states.
Yeah, and I think also, I don't believe, I have not heard news today, but I do not believe that the US has come out against Morocco's military action in Guerguerat.
No.
No.
over the weekend, and I wouldn't expect them to.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
and Morocco, just to close
yes.
out that point about the Morocco as a bastion of moderate Islam, and also having made incredible efforts to make sure that extremists are not able to operate here, or even are not, I don't know, provided with any kind of encouragement here. Morocco is one of the stalwart allies in terms of not permitting extremism to flourish. And the United States has long recognized that function.
For sure. Actually, we've talked about the Moroccan-American relationship under those elections, the result of those elections. And now I want to ask you, Professor Myers, about now that America and the world after Trump, what are the challenges and the stakes that are that the Biden administration will be facing?
I think Professor Filali, Dr. Filali, hit the nail on the head with the division in the country. We have half the country, a little bit more than half the country, is happy and relieved and not holding their breath anymore, as you point out every time the president opens his mouth in a speech. But the other half is angry, very angry. And we see that with the demonstrations that have happened in Washington over the weekend. We've seen that with the demonstrations in front of the ballot counting facilities, which in some states are saying stop the count, and in other states are saying count the ballots. You know, it's just, but this is one area he's really going to have to deal with. And I think in the speeches he's given so far in the past week, they have been, he's been solicitous. He indicates that he understands that many people are just not happy with it. But the democratic process is such that in order to have a fully functioning democracy, we have to have a transition. We have to have people let the election process finish. If there are court cases that are going to continue, that amazingly will continue without evidence, then let them continue. But we cannot deny, we cannot reject, and we cannot have a coup, which is essentially what Donald Trump is continuing to do by refusing to recognize that a transition is now occurring. And the Biden transition team is working on that now. They are communicating with those who must be communicated with. They have already established their COVID team made up totally of scientists. And the American public has to, as in every single election since our Civil War, has to come to terms with this as a matter of their obligations as American citizens. Because with the rights that we have as part of our government contract, as part of our government compact under our US Constitution, we get rights, but we have an obligation. We have an obligation to respect the process, to respect the institutions, and to ultimately, you don't have to respect the president, but recognize we will have a new president on January 20th at noon.
Yes, but let me please be more specific concerning this third question about the United States of America and the world. Maybe let's take the example of the relationship between America and China. How do you, Professor Myers, how do you imagine China to be treated by Biden and its administration during his mandate?
Yeah, well, China, obviously one of the largest growing economies, wields a lot of economic power. We have had a lot of trade with China. I do not believe that the tariffs that the Trump administration put into place helped our economy. I think it hurt our farmers. I don't think the Biden administration is going to do that. I think he's going to take a more rational approach a more economic approach. I think he's going to listen to advisors. And beyond that, I think all I can say is time will tell.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe Professor Filali, you have an opinion about that. Like
I think,
Chinese,
yeah, I think
China's
when,
example.
yeah, so previously we spoke about division within American society because of the election and because of the this previous administration. And I think when there is such frictions and divisions, there is also a national security issue. And this national security will be kind of expanded broadly. So when the issue with China and in particular South China Sea. So the Professor Myers mentioned the issue with tariffs and the negative impact on the American farmers for imposing those tariffs on the Chinese administration. And I think also when we try kind of to make a profile of his personality as the leader of China in particular, so he's kind of a rational and wise man. Mm-hmm. When dealing with foreign policy. Mm-hmm. So United States, and I think Biden's administration is going to restore such tension. So there is a tension right now in South China Sea. There is a rising issue that is called the Quad. So between Australia, Japan, India, and the United States. It's when you look at this four countries, this Quad, it is like a square kind of trying to a square covering, I would say, the South China Sea. So it was, and China looked at it as a threat. But as I said, Xi Jinping is a kind of a wise and calm leader. He didn't take it that much in a higher level. Mm-hmm. So right now, I think Biden's strategy, or the grand American strategy in terms of South China Sea, mm-hmm. or the Southeast Asian countries, I mean, even rich in Australia, it's going to restore such an image. Mm-hmm. And we can recall that even Trump administration went to Japan and asked for $8 billion mm-hmm. for payment. Mm-hmm. So we know that Japan pays, I would say, $2 billion a year, I think, for the American American bases in Okinawa and Saipan. Mm-hmm. So he asked for $8 billion, and the Japanese were kind of Shinzo Abe was furious about this decision, and mm-hmm. I hope for the sake of peace in this region that Biden's administration will take into consideration this kind of friction. And last point, I think this administration had ignited a situation that never existed before, and it was the first time in history of South China Sea that a Chinese aircraft carrier called Liaoning traveled, across Thailand, Philippines, and reached Senkaku Island next to Japan. And because, this was because of COVID-19, and because USS Roosevelt was hit by COVID at that time, and space was open for the Chinese to freely sail in the shores of Thailand, Philippines, and Senkaku Island in Japan. Mm-hmm. And I think if there is a wise administration, American administration, this won't be taking place.
Yes,
this
hopefully. Hopefully, and actually, we hope that the American foreign policy will recover, and at the same time, the whole world will hopefully be treated respectfully. If I take the example of Canada, the first America's closest neighbor, and how Donald Trump treated our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Hopefully, Biden's administration will have another kind of orientation, another kind of treatment to the whole world. We are having a very big hope, and actually those elections have revealed that America was needed strongly a peace and love president, and a president that will not govern America with his tweets.
Yes, totally agree with that. And I think one of the major differences is going to be that we will no longer have a transactional kind of president. And everything Trump does is transactional. It's a tit for tat kind of thing.
Yes, yes.
We will have a president who respects international institutions like NATO. We won't have this, oh, we're paying too much. Trump's narrative on that was another falsehood.
Yes.
Biden understands that. Other institutions like the UN, like the environment, but also the organization that has provided aid to Palestinians. Trump defunded that completely and closed the office. Yeah, UNRWA. Also the International Criminal Court. Trump, because the US was potentially going to be investigated by an ICC proceeding regarding war crimes in Afghanistan. Trump revoked the visa of the chief prosecutor of that court so that she could not come to the United States to continue the investigations and talk with those people she needed to talk with. These kinds of things really are unprecedented. And I don't believe that the Biden administration will be engaging in those kinds of transactional tit for tat, much less vindictive acts against sovereigns, against sovereign states, against institutions, or against individuals.
And as you said about the individuals, I hope that Biden's policy will really help American individuals regain confidence in themselves and confidence in their government. Professor Myers, Professor Filali, I was extremely honored, and I really appreciated discussing and exchanging with you. It was very interesting to talk about all the challenges, the stakes, and make a very large reading of the results of the presidential American elections. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My pleasure. There's certainly a lot to talk about. And if anybody wants to continue the dialogue and the debate, I actually last week launched a new segment on a show that comes out of Kenya. I'm here in Morocco, but my segment is called the Tilila Report. Tilila meaning freedom in Tamazight. Yes. Which I love. I love that as a concept, and I also love that because it's my adopted Moroccan name.
Oh my So let's call you Tilila.
Yes, you can. and that I will have additional segments talking about things as the election progresses, as the post-election things develop, with the Electoral College, with the certification of the states, with ultimately the inauguration on January 20th. I'll be continuing this dialogue on that show.
This is great, and we will attach actually the link. If you provide us with the link, we will attach it to our program. Thank you so much, Professor Filali from Ottawa. Thank you for your confidence, and thank you for always giving us your valuable opinions.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
مشاهدينا الاعزاء على برنامج بوزيتيفا مروكو، كنشكركم على ثقتكم فينا وكنشكركم على تتبعكم لنا، والى حلقه قادمه ان شاء الله وموضوع ان شاء الله يفيدكم. مع السلامه.
مع السلامه.
مع السلامه.